Could Helen Zille become the next mayor of Johannesburg? That's a conversation that has been dominating parts of social media and is dominating parts of mainstream media. Helen Zille has indicated that she would consider standing as the Democratic Alliance's mayoral candidate for Johannesburg in the next year's local government election. So senior DA sources, which basically tells you that Helen and some friends of hers have indicated to News 24 and the publications that are under that umbrella that Helen Zille has been encouraged to make herself available as the party's candidate for the 2026 local government elections. Now, if she becomes available, that really could be a game changer for the Democratic Alliance and its prospects for taking over the city of Johannesburg. Zille herself has confirmed to these media publications that she has been approached to make herself available and is actually considering it. She's thinking about it. She misses being in the ring. She misses the campaign trail. So she's considering it. And let's be honest, Helen Zille has had a largely positive reputation as an administrator. She served as the mayor of Cape Town from 2006 to 2009. So when she was elected in 2006, it was with a narrow majority. She had the support of 6 smaller parties. Her majority was 3 seats. And during that tenure, she actually was given a lot of kudos by the international community. She was awarded World Mayor of the Year in 2008. That's nothing to, scoff at. It's a significant accomplishment. She was praised also for her leadership in managing Cape Town as a host city for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. Although she was no longer mayor in 2010, all of the build-up work, the groundwork was done under her administration, overseeing the construction and the financing of the Cape Town Stadium. After she served as mayor, she served as the premier of the Western Cape from 2009 to 2019. And she won 2 consecutive 5-year terms. Under her leadership, you can tell that there was a lot of growing support in terms of the execution of delivery because the Democratic Alliance increased its share of the provincial vote. They were on 51.46% in 2009, and they were at nearly 60% in 2014, right? And that solidified the DA's control of the province. That provincial support has dropped slightly in recent years to 55% in both the 2019 and the 2024 elections, but significantly more than where they were in 2009. In 2006, the DA had a 41% share of the vote in Cape Town, and they needed a coalition. Since 2011, the DA has basically governed Cape Town alone with a clear majority, although that majority has been going up and down a little bit and has dropped significantly. For instance, in 2011, it was 61%. 2016, it was 67%. In 2021, it was 58%. So it's no longer at the peak that it was in 2016, but it's still relatively high. And even if they were to drop some votes because of the Patriotic Alliance, for example, they may be able to retain control of the city without having to go into a coalition. So that will take their stretch of running the city exclusively if they win in 2026 to 20 years. 2006 was with the coalition, but they were still running the city. So that would take their stretch of running Cape Town to 20 years if they do win and maintain above 50% of the vote share in that next election. So according to Helen Zille, she's actually convinced that there's an opportunity for the Democratic Alliance to take over and overtake the ANC as the largest party in Johannesburg, Egoli. In 2021, in the municipal elections, the DA secured 26.14% of the votes in Joburg, and that was a 7.46 percentage difference between the ANC and them, where the ANC was sitting on 33.6. And there's a thought process right now that the ANC is not doing so well and that they're slipping in terms of how much support they have. So the idea and the thinking is that the DA, in a well-funded local government election with the right candidate for mayor, could take down the ANC and actually have a path to governing the City of Gold, Johannesburg, with that majority or with a smaller coalition. The question then would be, who would be in that coalition. The dynamics are totally different now than they were for Helen Zille when it was 2006, for instance. And now there are new players on the block, and not all of them want to play with the Democratic Alliance. So then the question would be, who are you actually going to govern with? Who are you going to form a coalition with if you don't get close to 40? If you're low 30s, let's say you do beat the ANC, you get 31, they get 29. Then what? What happens? The city of Johannesburg has really been churning through mayors, and it was stable at the beginning. If you look at that, the ANC 1995, Isaac Mohase, and then you had Amos Masondo there, 11 years, 6 months, very stable, very steady. Pax Tau comes in there, 5 years, 3 months, very steady. ANC from 95 till 2016. Then you have a change there where Herman Mashaba comes in, relatively steady for him because he gets 3 years, 3 months, but then he gets removed, right? Then you get Jeff Mahubo coming in 1 year, 7 months. Then you get Jody Limatongo. He's not there for a long period of time, 1 month, 8 days. Then you get Mpo Morane, who's not there for a long period of time either, 1 month, 21 days. Then you have the local government elections happening. Then you have Mpo Palatse coming in. She's there for 1 year, 1 month. There's a bit of an interruption in her administration because she's removed, goes to court, comes back in. Then she comes back in again. Then there's a vote of no confidence, which this time is legally sound. And then she's removed for good. Then you have the Al-Jama era, where this small party comes in and they have Tapelo Ahmad. He comes in, he's only there for 3 months, actually just under 3 months, 2 months and some days. Then you've got Kabelo Kwamanda, who also is there for 1 year, 3 months. This becomes a period where the public is becoming more skeptical of the position of mayor because the two Al-Jama guys had different controversies around them, different allegations, some of which have been cleared up, some of which remain in the air, but the people were not really impressed with that. Then you've got Dada Morero, who came in last year in August and is still the mayor, and people are not necessarily impressed with his delivery and his performance. So as you can see, as time has been going, especially into that coalition period, you've had the most churn in terms of mayors. But if you're thinking about the recent era, we'll discuss how that's also been quite tumultuous and would be would pose a problem or a challenge in terms of the person who becomes mayor of Johannesburg. Johannesburg is not in a steady situation like Cape Town is right now. It's in a very unstable situation because of the coalition governments. But it's important just to point out that Johannesburg is still the economic center and the political center of South Africa. And that's why it's desirable to the Democratic Alliance, right? There are 15.1 million people living in Gauteng. There are 5 million people living in Johannesburg alone. There are 6.48 million registered voters in Gauteng, with 2.4 million or 36% of the registered voters in Gauteng living in Johannesburg. It's the main stage. But it's a difficult stage to manage and lead at this particular point because everybody is competing and different parties have got different attraction points, value propositions, and people are not voting consistently for one political party. This is the challenge that Helen Zille would be facing in running for this position at her age of 75, with the dynamics in South Africa being such as they are. Maybe she would have done better if she had run for it in 2016. Instead of Herman Mashaba coming in, she would have come in there. I think they could have had a different premier of the Western Cape, and things would have kept going relatively in the same way. But that opportunity, as things stand now, would be difficult to capitalize on. But let's talk some more about the economic value of Gauteng and Joburg. So Gauteng, in and of itself, it remains the largest province in terms of nominal GDP, according to Stats South Africa, contributing 33.2% to South Africa's GDP. It's followed by KwaZulu-Natal, which contributes 16.2%, Western Cape, which contributes 14%, while the Northern Cape contributes 2.3% and is the smallest contributor. The structure of the economy in each province differs. Finance, real estate, and business services are the largest contributor in Gauteng, representing 27% of Gauteng's contributions. Western Cape, 26% come from finance, real estate, and business. Free State, 18%. Personal services, largest contributor in Eastern Cape, in Limpopo as well, and in KwaZulu-Natal, mining and quarrying, largest contributor in Northwest and Mpumalanga and Northern Cape, coming in mining and quarrying, Northwest 25%, Mpumalanga 18%, and Northern Cape 17% of the contributor to its GDP coming from mining and quarrying. So you can see there are finance, real estate, business service centers, Gauteng, Western Cape, and then they are service driven economies within South Africa, and then there are these mining and quarrying economies within South Africa in terms of the provincial GDPs. So as you can see, 27% Gauteng and Joburg is a large part of that contributor. So in as much as there's discourse about semigration to the Western Cape and all of that, the jewel of the South African economy remains Gauteng, and Joburg remains the crown of that jewel. I should have said it the other way, right? That the crown is Gauteng, and then the jewel on that crown is Joburg. There we go. I think that makes better sense. So as I said, coalitions have been tricky and unstable in Johannesburg. Since 2021, there have been 4 mayors in Johannesburg, 6 leadership changes. In 2021, Popalatse came in from the DA. She was elected mayor, forming a minority coalition with Action SA, IFP, Freedom Front Plus, ACDP, COPE, and the UIM. However, this coalition collapsed. Palatse was removed via a motion of no confidence, right? There was interim removal as well when Dada Morero came in, then he came out. Tapelo Ahmad then came in from Al Jama. He was chosen to succeed in Popalatse. This was now a coalition between the ANC, EFF, PA, and ATM that voted for him. He resigned 2.5 or so months later, a day before a motion of no confidence against him could proceed. He was replaced by his party colleague, Kabelo Kwamanda, who then lasted until August of last year. He was ousted and replaced by the ANC's Dada Morero with votes from EFF, Action SA, Patriotic Alliance, ATM, and Al Jama. So you can see that the dynamics are moving here. Action SA was one of the parties, I think, that shifted the dynamics of power, the balance of power, and one of the things that has made Helen Zille quite furious at Herman Mashaba, and could be one of the reasons why she wants to get back into the ring to try to get one back at Action SA, somebody who was within the DA, Herman Mashaba, who was the mayor of Johannesburg himself, and now has a mayor in Tshwane who is getting positive reviews. Nasipa is getting positive reviews in terms of her performance as the mayor of Tshwane. So there may be an appetite from Helen Zille to come in and then try to win the city back for the DA, or win the city for the DA. What has been the reaction to this particular announcement? The reaction has been interesting because there are 2 different views online, and I'm going to give you 2 examples of how people have responded. Some people have been enthusiastic, and others have been extremely critical of Helen Zille entering the ring and trying to contest for mayor of Johannesburg. So Kaya Dlanga, for instance, a prominent marketing executive and book author, has weighed in, right? He said this: Helen Zille is considering running for Johannesburg mayor in 2026, apparently. Let me tell you now, if she does, she'll win. And not by accident. Like it or not, she has a proven record of turning a city around. Just look at Cape Town. You can debate her politics all you want, but she gets things done. Joburg, as it stands, is crying out for that kind of leadership. And Cape Town has the lowest unemployment rate of all major cities. If this happens, the ANC will lose Johannesburg for good. And when Joburg goes, so does Gauteng. People are tired. They want working traffic lights, clean streets, functioning municipalities, not endless excuses. Right now, everyone is complaining about what the ANC has done to the city. Zille offers a real, visible alternative. This might be uncomfortable for some to hear, but mark this tweet and save it. If I'm wrong, I will say so, but I doubt I will be. On that same conversational thread started by Kaya Dlanga, we had Lupumulo Kaisa coming in saying, the DA or Zille is not some governance miracle. Just look at the city of Tshwane. Under DA leadership, the city fell into chaos, coalition collapse, unpaid workers, budget paralysis, and service delivery failure, especially in black communities and black working class areas. The pattern is familiar. Affluent suburbs get maintenance and resources, while townships are left to rot. That is not good governance. It is racialized service delivery, hiding behind corporate branding and PR spin. Now to Cape Town, the DA's so-called crown jewel. The city's inner core and affluent suburbs are indeed polished, but visit Khayelitsha, Nyanga, Delft, or parts of Mitchell's Plain, and you will see gross underdevelopment, violence, and sheer municipal neglect. A classic tale of two cities divided by class and race. Cape Town's low unemployment rate is another myth that needs busting. That economy thrives on inherited structural advantages, for instance, tourism, old money, and a diversified economy the DA did not create. Let's not mistake inherited privilege for innovative governance. The DA, Zille's entire claim of "we get things done," begs the question, for whom? Because it certainly isn't the residents of under-resourced townships where broken sewage systems and safety concerns are the daily reality. Let's also not forget the DA's history of racial tension, policy exclusion, and a deeply problematic relationship with black leadership within its own ranks. Joburg is indeed in crisis, and faith in the ANC is understandably low. But let's not blindly assume the DA, or Helen Zille specifically, is the answer. Tshwane proves otherwise. Cape Town's duality proves otherwise. Good governance is not just about functioning traffic lights and clean pavements in Sandton. It's about equitable, consistent service delivery across all communities. That's the benchmark, and the DA falls short every time. That's what he said. Now, here's my view on the city of Cape Town and the Helen Zille candidacy and what prospects it has for success. Your perception of Cape Town is going to be influenced by where you focus your gaze. It is a city of contradictions and inequalities. If you only look at Sea Point and the City Bowl, you will have a view that it's an excellent city. However, if you see Khayelitsha, Mitchell's Plain, you will see slums and extreme poverty. And that will counter and contradict the narrative that the Democratic Alliance is doing well. Part of the reason why there is such a positive perception of Cape Town is that the DA has very deliberately made sure that the recreational facilities, the beaches, the parks, the bathhouses are well maintained and updated. The places where the public encounters the city in mass and where tourists and international travelers would encounter the city are well maintained. For example, they have 18 driving license testing centers available all over Cape Town for card renewals, driving license tests, learner license tests. They have 141 functioning libraries and one satellite library. The libraries loan out books, but they can also provide electronic resources and community programs, and also can be used for hosting of events. They have 34 early childhood development centers, which look well maintained. The signature venues which they have are well managed, namely the Athlon Stadium, the Cape Town City Hall, the Grand Parade, the Greenpoint Athletic Stadium. I think the Cape Town Marathon is often held, or you start at that stadium basically and end there. And it's a beautiful stadium. That whole Sea Point area, well maintained. You can see that it's well taken care of. And in interacting with those public areas, waterfront, etc., people then say, wow, this is excellent. This is beautiful. Airport, this is excellent. This is beautiful. But when you do go into the details of how people are living, black people, colored people in particular, you do find that it's far from idyllic, and it's comparable, if not worse, than how people are living in Johannesburg, in Soshanguve, in any other part of the country which is challenged with the inequalities of service delivery, whether it's Umlazi or Soshanguve or whatever the case may be. It's the same, right? So let's talk about what some of the research is saying. Research indicates that households in the Western Cape are more likely to be victims of crime than in any other province. This comes from the Victims of Crime Survey data, which was released by then Statistician General Phalile Hotla. Throughout the 4-year period that they looked at, from 2013 to 2017, the Western Cape was the top position, having the highest proportion of households victimized by crime. That's one statistic to consider. Here's another. There are extremely high levels of violent crime in Cape Town. They are often unevenly distributed. If you look at the crime statistics, the data indicates that violent crimes are largely confined to sprawling informal settlements on the Cape Flats, and they are absent from tourist areas such as the Atlantic seaboard. out of the 61 police precincts, the top 5 precincts that have the highest number of reported crime cases for violent crimes in Cape Town are consistently the following: Nyanga, Mitchell's Plain, Khayelitsha, Harare, Kraaifontein, right? Khayelitsha, for instance, has an area which comprises 3 police precincts: Khayelitsha, Harare, and Lingeletu West. And when they are added together, Khayelitsha often has the highest number of reported crimes. If you look at the meta statistics, you will see how dangerous Cape Town is if you don't have the right address. In the top 5, look at how many Cape Town police stations feature in terms of the top murder police stations, in terms of where the police, where murder is reported the most at those police stations. Now, I mentioned earlier the 34 ECD centers, and I said those ECD centers look beautiful. They look well maintained. They're colorful if you look at them. But that is one of the weak points of Cape Town. I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Public education in Cape Town is not as advertised. And I'll use these ECDs as an example. 34 centers is nowhere near what they need to have for the population in the townships. And if you think about how many people are in Khayelitsha alone, there's an estimate that there are 1 million people living in Khayelitsha. 34 ECD centers is not enough just for Khayelitsha. Just for Khayelitsha. What about the whole of Cape Town? As you can see, there's an issue there. Then there's also the issue of the cost of living. Cape Town is not affordable to live. And it's a factor. When you're running for mayor, are you going to make Johannesburg as expensive as Cape Town? What does that do for wealth creation, wealth formation? What does that do for standards of living? What does that do for people who have to, support their families, not only in the city, but send money back home to KZN, to Eastern Cape, whatever the case may be? Because what the City of Cape Town did is that they allowed this preponderance of Airbnbs, and these guys came in and they developed the buildings. But what that did is that for people who want to rent, housing became extremely unaffordable. It's difficult to get a decently priced accommodation in Cape Town close to where you work right now. As things stand, only tourists can really afford to live next to the nicest parts of Cape Town, and people with old money, legacy money, apartheid money, the families which were prospering in that time are the families which own property in present day Cape Town. So here's what the data is showing. Cape Town has become prohibitively expensive to live on an average salary. For those working in the formal sector, average monthly earnings, according to the last quarterly employment survey, were 28,231. Then you have another income data point. The median income, according to the income expenditure survey, was 7,890 monthly income. So if you're getting the median national income, 7,890, it's going to be very difficult for you to support a family in Cape Town. But it's also going to be difficult for you if you're making the quarterly employment survey average, if you're working in the formal sector. There's a big discrepancy in South Africa around incomes. So these numbers, they're just giving a feel for what people are really earning. But you need to remember, many people are living on grants. Many people do not even hit these numbers of 7,000, 28,000. And that's what makes it difficult for people to afford to live in a place like Cape Town. Whichever one you pick, it will be difficult to live in the Western Cape on that income as a household. The cost of housing in Cape Town is 34% more than the cost of housing in Johannesburg. So young professionals, young artisans, young technicians would have a hard time buying property, sending their kids to good schools in Cape Town. The private schools they will hit you here. Private schooling in Cape Town will hit you here. If you can get your kid in, it's difficult to afford the rental and the education costs. And really, those are the challenges. Cost of living in Cape Town, if you are making, an average or close to average salary, you'd struggle. And then you have to go live ekasi. And then if you don't have a car, you're going to be struggling with the cost of transportation, the amount of time it takes for you to get to work. It's quite a headache to get from, the informal settlements or the townships into the CBD, the Central Business District of Cape Town. So that's the reality. So I think that there is a positive argument that can be made around Helen Zille's execution of leadership in the city of Cape Town. And that pertains to managing of the finances in a clean way. That pertains to handling various projects in a manner that improve those particular projects, particularly the places where people see and where people visit. And there's a lot of free things that you can do in Cape Town. You can enjoy the scenery. It's relatively safe in those affluent and public areas. The challenge is when you're not in those areas, it's just like the rest of South Africa. And, whether you are in Kukuletu, Khayelitsha, Soshanguve, or Alex, you're not going to necessarily feel that, no, this area is DA or that area is the other. It's the same. It's the same. The DA is not doing better there. Then the question then becomes, when you think about Johannesburg, what do you care about as the voter? Do you care about the roads in the suburbs, the state of Rosebank and Sandton? And by the way, they are also they're fine right now. There's potholes, that's a big issue. And there are traffic lights that are broken. That's an issue as well. But Rosebank is developing, the new buildings popping up all over the place in Rosebank. I don't think that Helen Zille would stop or accelerate that in any way, right? However, let's talk about the political viability of this strategy. Let's talk about the political viability of this strategy. In politics, perception is reality. I just outlined to you that there's a debate around the actual safety of Cape Town, the cost of living in Cape Town, and the service delivery to Black and colored areas in Cape Town. But in politics, perception is reality. And despite the conversation we just had about those substantive issues, there is a perception that Cape Town and the Western Cape are better managed than Gauteng and Johannesburg. There's a perception that Helen Zille did a great job administratively in Cape Town. There's also a perception that the ANC is doing a horrible job in Johannesburg and that the quality of leadership being put forward is not visionary and not capable of addressing the challenges which the city of Johannesburg is facing. The challenges in the city are such that there are many voters who will be persuaded and tempted to vote for the old mayor of Cape Town, Helen Zille. They'll be tempted because if you've been to Cape Town, you feel like, oh, this is better than Joburg. And because you're not necessarily going to go into the dangerous parts, you're not going to go into Danun City, you're not going to go into Khayelitsha if you're a tourist, you're not going to see those places. So you're going to feel like, oh, yeah, they're doing a good job. And some people even forget, I once saw somebody posting on social media that you can immediately tell the difference between Cape Town and Johannesburg from the airport. There's a whole squatter camp between Cape Town and the CBD of Cape Town that you see as you drive out of the airport. That person totally forgot that because, you know what, perception is reality. Maybe they've seen it so many times, it blurred out of their minds and they've never had to visit an informal settlement or live in an informal settlement. So they've never had to understand what it is. And you know what? Sometimes we sugarcoat to the detriment of accountability what the informal settlements are. They are slums. We have slums in Cape Town, large slums with poor service delivery, with sewage running in the streets. Children are walking and exposed to sewage. They're slums. The ANC's also got slums, and they need to be held to account because people should not be living in slums. They should be living in decent housing, and it's a constitutional right. So that perception being reality could be something that will make Helen Zille attractive to a large number of voters, Black and white and colored, right? Johannesburg residents are dealing with a variety of problems and are generally critical right now of the quality of service delivery in the city. There are issues of high crime rate, issues of high unemployment rate, there are issues of lack of adequate infrastructure maintenance. One of the most frequent problems that people encounter that irritate them, that cause tire damage, they have to replace tires, etc., potholes. There are frequent power and water outages. The water outages have been getting worse. There's been water rationing and all kinds of stuff that you'll see people talking about experiencing in their neighborhoods. So even now, you're not guaranteed that when you turn on the taps, when you get home from work, water is going to be flowing. Earlier this year, President Cyril Ramaphosa made a surprise visit to Johannesburg and said that he was shocked at the deterioration of infrastructure. Ramaphosa announced that a presidential task team would tackle the service delivery issues in Joburg. The mayor of the city then apologized to the president, and now he has announced this bomb squad, which is supposed to help him turn the city around. So I think there's an acknowledgement even from the ANC that, listen, things are not working and they're not working well. When you consider the fact that the Auditor General has reported positively on the financial management in Cape Town and the Western Cape, most of the local municipalities with clean audits were in the Western Cape. Cape Town was the only metro with a clean audit. For many people, that's enough. They don't want the money going to Hosh Curry Mimas and Hosh Curry fathers. They don't want the money going to Edwin Sodi's nightclub, Konka, Zanzu, all of those places. They want the money to go to the pothole. They want the money to go to the traffic light. They want the money to go to the ECD center. They want the money to go where it's supposed to go, not to Hosh Curry Mimas, not to Hosh. They don't want Hosh business. They don't want Hosh Curry behavior, right? They don't want Hosh Curry tendencies. They don't want any of that, right? So they may view Helen Zille as being somebody who's not Hosh attracted. She is just interested in running the city. She's interested in, being in power, etc. So unless her son wants to do a project with iPads in the townships, Helen Zille will be straight and narrow. Remember, you may have forgotten this. This is one of the criticisms you need to be aware of. Helen Zille's son approached her and wanted to do a project teaching maths in the townships. And she gave him tablets, which were funded by the Western Cape province. And then he went and he did his maths project in the townships. Good project. That's a conflict of interest. And the public protector ruled against her and said that actually she had violated the ethics code. And then she said, no, it wasn't a conflict of interest. It was a convergence of interest that I gave my son these tablets from the province. So in as much as I'm saying there's no Hosh Curry behavior, there's still a Hosh Curry question mark. It's a sun curry because she went to Sankara, the sun, and what Tsara. Just something to be aware of. Even though the Western Cape has this reputation of being above board, we do know that there are gangs operating. We did see that Malusi Boy was accused of giving these gangs tenders to work with the city. He was fired. His offices were raided. There was a police case. Now there's no more police case. So the idea that there's full cleanliness is one that I think we got to just put a star on. Just put everything that I've just said is just a little star. But those perceptions are going to help Helen Zille, right? And if you think about the fact that some major international companies recently have chosen to set up their headquarters in the Western Cape, Amazon, after all of the years trying to get into South Africa, they said, where are we going to go? We're going to go to the Western Cape. We're going to go to Cape Town. That just shows that there's a lot of business confidence about Cape Town. There's a lot of goodwill towards Cape Town. A lot of people, there was this idea of semigration, not emigration, but semigration. So instead of going to Canada, trying to go to Australia, trying to go to London, and then, having to live a whole new life and finding out that it's way more expensive to live the quality of life that middle-class South Africa lives here in Joburg and other places, just go to Cape Town. So many people left Johannesburg, said, we're done with Johannesburg. Then they went to the Western Cape, and some of them went to Stellenbosch, Hermanus, some of them went to Cape Town. So that was the semigration, and there were articles on it and discussions around it. So even within South Africa, affluent people and people within the middle class have said they would rather prefer living in the Western Cape and in Cape Town than living in Johannesburg. All of this is to say, in the suburbs, in the professional communities, there's going to be people who are going to be excited about Helen Zille contesting. And the perception is going to be the reality. Now, there are some issues, and that would mean she would have strong prospects, right? There are some issues which could affect the campaign. Firstly, Helen Zille will be turning 75 at the onset of the campaign. There are going to be questions around, does she have enough stamina for a full campaign and enough stamina to really be able to do the work to turn the city around? When your name is on the poster, when you're the one running for mayor, you have to be on the ground. Campaigning can be very labor intensive and exhausting. So in and of itself, there are questions there about acuity, questions around being able to handle the job all the way up until 80. There are questions around this whole idea of, is there not a dictatorship now in the DA, and to keep having the same person, same way that people will say, well, why is Mugabe running things up until he's such an age? Isn't that true of also Helen Zille, that she's now blocking other young people from being able to get some, time to shine, so to speak? At some point, she was a young leader. At some point, she was somebody who was untested as a mayor, and she got that opportunity and was able to do well in Cape Town in 2006. Next year, 2026, is someone else's 2006. Why don't you open the door for them, give them a chance? That's going to be part of the conversation. Some people may not care. They'll be like, I don't care. Helen Zille at 75 is still better than XYZ at 45, especially if XYZ is coming from ANC or whatever. There'll be people who think like that. Secondly, there's going to be this question around she's been away from Joburg for too long. Helen Zille and her husband, her children, grandchildren all live in Cape Town. This means that she doesn't necessarily have that ground view perspective of the dynamics in the city and the reasons why there are certain service delivery bottlenecks in the city. It's easy when you're on the outside saying, I'll coach Kaizer Chiefs this particular direction and they'll win the whole thing. And then you come in and then you flop worse than the last guy, right? So those are reality. Those blind spots can be an impediment to getting real impact in the worst affected areas of the city. On the other hand, we have to be aware that Helen Zille did spend her early years in Johannesburg, her formative years and her early work years. She was born in Hillbrow. Her family lived in Rivonia. She went to one of the elite schools in Johannesburg, St. Mary's School in Waverley. Then she studied at the University of the Witwatersrand. Then she went to Cape Town only in 1989 and lived there ever since. So her experience of living in Johannesburg are 36 years old, and her experiences of living out of Johannesburg are 36, and her experiences of living in Johannesburg are 38 years. So she had 38 years living in Johannesburg, 36 years living out of Johannesburg. And you can still observe a lot in that 36-year-old period, but that 38-year period. But if we think about it, the city has changed so much since 1989. And if you're not on the ground living there day to day, you will lose some stuff. Of course, you're still in South Africa. You can still, visit, and she did visit, I'm sure, and would have an understanding. But you could lose some appreciation of the dynamics, right? The third major challenge she's going to face is that her political statements and rhetoric could be used against her in a campaign. Yes, local government is about service delivery. Yes, as Kaya Langa said, some people don't like her politics, but they're willing to overlook that. And it doesn't always factor in local government what your national level politics are. But people are complex and they're multidimensional, and likability is a factor to electability, right? Helen Zille has been periodically making arguments which sound like the romanticization of colonialism and even apartheid. She's also referred to people from the Eastern Cape as refugees, and this was something that was offensive to members of the Eastern Cape community, the Xhosa community, and they were unhappy with that. In 2012, Helen Zille labeled pupils from the Eastern Cape who moved to the Western Cape in search of a better education as education refugees. In 2017, she said that for those claiming the legacy of colonialism was only negative, think of our independent judiciary, transport infrastructure, piped water. That came across as some kind of a tacit endorsement or celebration of colonialism. In 2025, she said recently, in fact, that nothing is stopping Black people from following the example of Afrikaners to achieve economic freedom. She said Afrikaners took all of the opportunities that they had very seriously. They educated their children into professional skills, and out of poverty, they built huge enterprises from the bottom up. Nothing is stopping everyone else from following that example. In her telling of the story in this latest one, she came across as ignoring various pieces of legislation which dispossessed the Black community and made them economically uncompetitive in the pre-apartheid era and during the apartheid era. If you look at the Native Land Act of 1913, it reserved, I think, only less than 10% of the land for Black people. The Bantu Education Act of 1953 put into law the deliberate miseducation of Black people to give them an inferior education and inferior services in education. The Group Areas Act of 1950 removed Black people from the suburbs in certain other areas so that they couldn't live in these middle class to affluent areas. She also seems to ignore the fact that the Mines and Works Act of 1911, right, which was known as the Job Color Bar, reserved labor positions in the mines for certain labor positions for white workers, ensuring that they received 5 to 10 times wages higher than those earned by Black workers. If you look at the extension of the University Education Act of 1959, this largely prohibited established universities from accepting non-white students, further restricting access to professional training, right? If you look at the pre-apartheid era and her narrative, because if you try to be charitable to her, to say, okay, maybe she's, pre-apartheid era, maybe there are key lessons that can be learned, that ignores some of the things that were deliberately done and were the precursor to apartheid and are not worth celebrating. Let's look at the timeline. In 1914, JBM Herzog formed the National Party. The following year, Naspers was formed by the same man, which then created that newspaper, Die Burger, which was the nationalist propaganda newspaper. D.F. Malan then became the editor of the paper, and the paper was the main supporter of Afrikaner nationalism and the Nationalist Party. The two instruments, the party and the paper, became the vehicle for the economic progression of the Afrikaners and Afrikaner nationalism in South Africa, right? 10 years later, the dividends paid off for J.M. Herzog. They won the general election. The National Party defeated the South African Party of Jan Smuts and formed a coalition government with the South African Labour Party, which became known as the Pact Government. As Prime Minister, Herzog presided over the passage of a wide range of social and economic measures that did much to improve the working conditions the conditions of working class white people in South Africa. He created a Department of Labor which was established, and the Wages Act of 1925 laid down minimum wages for unskilled white workers, right? Then you had the formation of institutions financial institutions such as Sanlam, Santam, and Absa, which were part of an coordinated economic strategy by the Broederbond. You had this community, this elite community of Afrikaners that was a secret society that orchestrated the rise or the precursor period to apartheid and maintained the apartheid regime. So you can sanitize parts of that story. But the period between 1914 and 1948 was like a chef who was cutting up vegetables and meat for his oven. So let's say I'm trying to make an oxtail, right? I'm going to get my bay leaves, I'm going to get my oxtail, I'm going to my onions, my whatever. I'm chopping everything up. I'm getting ready to cook. So then the period of 1948 to 1994 was the cooking of black people in the oven of apartheid. So if you then treat the period where I'm chopping onions, getting my bay leaf ready, as if it's separate from the period where the oxtail is in the oven in a slow roast situation, you are mischaracterizing the nature of my chopping of the onions. You really are. They're not disconnected events. They exist on a continuum. And Helen Zille just saying, why not copy the example of the Afrikaners pre-1948? It sounds like an endorsement of the treatment of Africans through policy and an endorsement of some of the things that were done, which are atrocious and which she wouldn't want to be done, which is why people were like, what are you saying? What is this example that you want democratic South Africa to follow? Because the example as studied has a lot of problematic behavior in it, including the behavior of the Broederbond, including the behavior of Naspers, including the behavior of the National Party, including exclusionary laws that were passed in 1913, 1925. So that example doesn't make any sense. So there's also a contradiction in what Helen Zille is arguing, because, for instance, the DA as it stands now opposes the minimum wage. They oppose affirmative action policies. Herzog set a minimum wage in 1925, which was only for some people. So if you then say that the government of the day must follow the example of the government of 1925, are you then saying that they should impose a minimum wage while you oppose the minimum wage? There's a logical contradiction there. But the bigger point is that there are those challenges for Helen Zille. Her politics has been sometimes hurtful, sometimes offensive, sometimes coming across as a celebration of elements of colonialism, elements of the pre-apartheid era, which were harmful, elements of, endorsing apartheid stuff. And that's not good. And she will point out that, she reported on the death of Steve Biko and exposed the National Party. And that's true. And everyone celebrates her for that. It was a noble piece of journalism and a noble act of sacrifice to put yourself on the line like that as a journalist. You deserve all the credit for that. But it doesn't erase everything else that you've done since then. If you perform the heart surgery that saved a child in, let's say, 1992, that doesn't give you a justification to whip that adult in 2022, right? The fact that you are the one that saved them doesn't give you a room or space to abuse them later. And sometimes I think that's something that she doesn't appreciate, that people respect her for everything she did prior, but people are still critical of some of the stuff that she stands for now and her shift to the right. It doesn't seem that she's trying to be, a person who's crossing the line, trying to understand why people are saying what they're saying now, she seems to have taken this hard right, go woke, go broke type of an approach, which is a rejection of some of the policies that are very much still part of the need in South Africa, because you have such inequalities. And to be honest, there's still a lot of tension under the surface. So you can't necessarily just say, nah, let's just move on. Let's just move on. So that kind of a politics will come back to haunt her, in my opinion. But by and large, my conclusion is if she chooses to do so, she could really be a real threat to the ANC. I don't know if there are any health impediments that could hold her back at 75, but if she's healthy and she's willing, this could actually be a game changer for the election for mayor next year in Johannesburg. We'll have to see what happens. They're obviously testing the waters here. I don't know what you guys think. Let's have a conversation in the comment section. Till the next one.